Last week was the High Republic week. This week, Ahsoka TV week. HARK, we are here. It is time for yet another episode of Star Wars Limited preview coverage for Legends of the Force Set 5. We've got a couple of things to go over, lots of creator previews. One leader specifically because the Ahsoka leader herself I covered last week as part of my preview, exclusive preview for Star Wars Unlimited Set 5. Thank you once again to FFG for those previews. We're going to start off with our villainy leader. We'll talk a little bit about the other stuff that covers the heroism leader and go over all of the previews from creators that we've seen so far. So join me as we take a look at Morgan Elsbeth. Morgan Elsbeth, following the call, is our command villainy rare leader, Force, Imperial, and Knight traits. As an action, you could exhaust your leader to choose a friendly unit that attacked this phase. You get to play a unit from your hand that shares a keyword with the chosen unit, and it costs one less. As an epic action on 5, you flip into a 3/6 that just has a flat on attack. The next unit you play this phase costs one less if it shares a keyword with a friendly unit. This is number 5 out of 264 in LOF. At the beginning of the week, we saw a couple of previews that meshed very well with the idea of Morgan Elsbeth coming to the game, the Eye of Sion, which is something we'll talk about here in a minute, and then a couple of other things. And given those cards and something we've seen before with Morgan Elsbeth, I was actually figuring that Morgan was going to be either blue villainy or yellow villainy, and instead she's green villainy, which means you're likely not going to be able to pair all the things that associate with Morgan Elsbeth in a single premier deck, and for me, that's kind of a big design failure. All that aside, Morgan Elsbeth is a different way of doing ramp, focusing more on keywords, so you can kind of figure this as the dark side version of Boba Fett Daimyo from set 2, and you kind of get to where you're looking at. So on the front side, you have to attack with something, and it has to share a keyword with a card from your hand, but it does come into play one resource early. And then on the flip side, you'll only have to attack with Morgan, and you have to do it with a unit that shares a keyword that's already on the board. Attack with something that has ambush while you're on the front side, and then you action pay the cost, deploy the play the ambusher. You get that extra attack at a lower cost. But on the other side, you need to have that ambush already on the board, and then attack with Morgan, and then you can ambush on your next action. It is an interesting design. 3/6 we know is on the lower end of stats, 4 or 5 cost, not the lowest, because we've seen already in the set somebody with the lowest stats as a 5 cost. But it is one of those designs that probably could have been buffed up to a 7 health or a 4 attack to give some parity with other leaders that we already know are already good in the 5 slot that have those stats. Is every 4/6 on 5 a good leader? No. Is every 3/7 on 5 a good leader? No. But it's pretty close to being a good stat line for something that is in the 5 slot that doesn't buff other things that are currently on the board. Force, Imperial, and Knight traits do give her an opportunity to mesh with some of those strategies. Being a Force leader means she will trigger the common base use the Force thing, but she doesn't require having the Force, so it's not necessarily something that you need to worry about too much. The other big issue with Morgan Elsbeth, kind of another significant failure of the design of this card, she does not have her own keyword on the unit side in order to be able to help cheapen some of those things that are going to be coming out later with your when attacks. So it is at least a 3-card combo with all of these in order to be able to do stuff, and that unfortunately just isn't efficient enough to see play in Premiere. However, Twin Suns could be a super fun card in combination with Thrawn. Then you throw out your yellow base, you'll get access to all the things we've seen so far, but I'm also kind of expecting Marok, the Fallen Inquisitor, to be red, which means you'll never be able to put all the different colors of cards together in a single deck without having to pay an aspect penalty on something. But speaking of Eye of Sion, we have Eye of Sion, 2 Peridia, 6 cost command villainy space unit, 4 power, 7 health, Imperial vehicle transport, hidden, ambush, overwhelm, restore 1. It's a rare, number 88 out of 264 in LOF. So this does 2 things. First of all, it's a unit that can be cheapened with Morgan Elsbeth's ability on either side if you have a hidden, ambush, overwhelm, or restore units that's already on the board that is attacking on the leader side or is just there on the leader unit side. Then once the Eye of Sion is out, this also reduces the cost of all of those things once per round when you have the Eye of Sion on the board. So you can ambush in, you can overwhelm into something, you can restore, you have the hidden. There's a lot of different options that are available to you, and we'll see hidden come into play a little bit later, but green already has great ambushers, red has some decent overwhelms, blue has some good restores, hidden is kind of sprinkled across a bunch of different colors. So this will fit very well with Morgan Elspeth in any color combination you do, which may have been the goal, to force you to choose things. But ultimately, this is a lower power ship for 6 cost and space, but the idea isn't to do something itself, it's to support the rest of the strategy, as the Eye of Sion specifically did in the show, bringing the Chimera back from Peridian. So next up, we've got 3 previews coming by way of KTOD. Link in the description below to their preview. We have Magistrate Scout here, 3 cost Vigilance Villainy ground units, 2 power, 4 health Imperial Trooper, restore 2, common, 32 out of 264 in LOF. It gives that restore 2, so if you have this on the board, Eye of Sion can come out a thing cheaper. If you have the Eye of Sion on the board, this can come out for a thing cheaper. Easy enough meshing combo, but not necessarily a crazy good piece to have in any specific deck. Restore is pretty rare, not too rare in Villainy, but it's rare enough that this can be worth it if you want that restore. And then obviously, it's one of Morgan's troops, so you get to do things with the Matches of Straits. Next, we have the Itinerant Warrior, 4 cost Vigilance Heroism ground unit, 4 power, 4 health, Force, and Jedi traits, shielded, so it comes into play with a shield. When played, you may use the Force. If you do, heal 3 damage from a base. A common, 48 out of 264 in LOF. Great card for the stall strategies. You get a Force unit, you get a 4/4 on 4. It comes into play shielded, so it's going to be able to stop at least 1 packet of damage. And if you have the Force, you can heal damage from your base. This is actually probably one of the better common Jedi we've seen so far. This is going to be an absolute staple in limited decks because it is easily accessible. It's in the color that wants to do this stuff. And the Force will be relatively accessible in limited formats. And lastly, we have Kiari Mundi, We Must Push On. Again, 4 cost Aggression Heroism ground units, 4 power, 4 health, Force, Jedi, and Republic traits. When played, you may use the Force if you do draw 2 cards. This is an uncommon, number 148 out of 264 in LOF. 4 cost, 4 power, 4 health Jedi isn't the greatest, but if you have the Force, being able to draw 2 cards is actually quite good. We're seeing a lot more decks try to utilize the ability to get cards into hand and keep them in the hand to be able to do different things later on. You have things like McClunky returning your Underworld cards back to hand, R2-D2 and 3PO setting up a combo to be able to pull a card to your hand. You have Mon Mothma pulling a Rebel to hand. Lots of different strategies that are utilizing being able to get more cards in your hand or keep them there, so that way you have more resources as the game goes on. I don't know if this is going to be super playable, but it might be one of the more playable ones we've seen so far. And because it is a Force unit, it can trigger those things that allow you to do gain the Force off your common 28 health base. Drawing 2 cards, pretty decent. You just have to make sure you have the Force before you do this. Otherwise, you're going to miss the when played trigger. Next up, we have a batch of yellow cards that have some high synergy and some really cool stuff. The first one are going to be 2 previews coming by way of the Garbage Rollers. Link in the description below. They were blessed with having 2 synergistic cards coming together, really good cards as well. And then we'll have 2 previews that were just shown up on the FFG live stream, doing premiere gameplay from Legends of the Force. Link to that in the description below. And then also a spoiler on the FFG socials that meshes very well with these 2 cards we're about to see right now. So, by way of the Garbage Rollers, we have Shin Hati, Overeager Apprentice, 3 cost Cunning Villainy ground units, 4 power, 2 health, Force and Fringe traits, hidden and shielded, uncommon, number 183 out of 264 in LOF. We expect more health from 3 cost units because they are more susceptible to the damage that's being dealt to them by things that are lower cost. However, the fact that she's hidden, which means she can't be attacked the turn she comes into play, and shielded, which means she comes into play with a shield, she prevents 2 of the most common ways of getting rid of a unit from hitting her and being able to get her off the board, which is ambush, attacking with a unit that's already on the board, or just direct damage, which is quite good. She has 2 health, so she needs as much protection as she could possibly get. But in the early game phase, being able to drop a Shin Hati and then on the next round being able to attack with her very quickly to get that Force token if you need it with your common base, or to just take out something your opponent has and still live if the shield survives. Lots of different things you can do with Shin Hati here, and of course, because she's yellow, and yellow needs as much help as it can possibly get, she fits in every single strategy that wants to be able to utilize high-powered units early on to be able to do as much damage as possible. So, we have the Apprentice, What about the Master? We have Balin's Skull, Enigmatic Master, 5 cost, Cunning Villainy Ground units, 5 power, 5 health, Force and Fringe traits, also hidden, but when played you may use the Force. If you do return a non-leader unit that costs 4 or less to its owner's hand, then its owner may play it for free. This is an uncommon number 185 out of 264 in LOF. Balin's Skull here has hidden. It's a lower power health on the 5 cost curve, but I still think it's going to be good enough to utilize because a 5 cost 5 power will be able to do some extra damage in that 6 cost turn, especially with leader flips happening often at 6 cost. There's that whambo combo, bing bang boom, all kinds of different things. The when played, I think, is probably the most interesting portion of this character though, because you can bounce one of your opponent's units that costs 4 or less to get rid of upgrades off of them, to be able to make it so that they don't have anything that would be preventing you, maybe a temporary sentinel or whatever the case may be, or just to exhaust something that your opponent's going to smash into your face that costs 4 or less. However, you could also do this to your own units to be able to re-get your own when played effects. We were hoping that this was going to be something very strong that Qui-Gon Jinn can do, but Qui-Gon Jinn specifically negates villainy cards from being used in that strategy, so you won't be able to use things like Balin's Skull in that. But Balin himself is a mini Qui-Gon Jinn engine that allows you to dump one of your other units, say Shin Hati, back to your hand, which would then come back into play hidden so it can't be attacked that turn and with the shield. So I think this is actually going to be a decent card, and the pairing of these two, 3 Shin, 3 Balin, are going to be a great basis for a yellow Force deck with whatever leader you choose to use to be able to cash in on what hidden does and what these two can do together. However, this card specifically states 4 cost or less, and Shin Hati's a 3 cost. So what do we want to replay that has a 4 cost? Well, the answer to that is Dooku. It is too late. This is a 4 cost Cunning Ground unit, 5 power, 4 health, Force and Jedi traits, because apparently Dooku can't have more than 4 health. Hidden, so when it comes into play, can't be attacked. When played, each friendly unit with hidden can't be attacked for this phase. This is an uncommon number 211 out of 264 in LOF. So we actually have a kind of a curve here of uncommon units. Shin Hati at 3, Dooku at 4, and Balin's Skull at 5 that allow you to do some very interesting stuff that you can use with your curve smoother filler here to be able to do things that would protect your board and still be able to put pressure on your opponent. And Dooku making it so that when you play your Shin, you can Dooku the next turn. Now they're both protected from attacks. And then Balin's Skull can pick up Dooku and play him again. And now your whole board of hidden stuff is protected, even though Balin's already protected. But obviously, something's got to be able to double up on these things, right? So there's a lot of decent combo potential with just these 3 cards in a Force deck that's yellow. And while Dooku himself is pretty good in combination with things that do have hidden, because he's a Force, because he's a Jedi, he'll mesh with those strategies as well. Lightsabers, getting the Force off of bases, so on and so forth. And again, yellow needs as much help as it can get, so it needs these powerful cards to be injected directly into these decks, because we all know decks like Quinlan Voss need as much help as they can possibly get to remain competitive in the format. If you can't tell, it's obviously sarcasm. But I actually like the combination of these 3 cards all together. I'm hoping that Cal Kestis has some synergy with Dooku, because it'd be really cool to throw him into that deck, but you never know what's going to happen with those types of cards. Our last card in this batch is Shatterpoint, because blue needs more good removal pieces. Shatterpoint, 4 cost Vigilance Force event, choose one. Defeat a non-leader unit with 3 or less remaining HP, or use the Force. If you do, defeat a non-leader unit. Just vanquish it. Gone for 1 resource early. This is an uncommon number 79 out of 264 in LOF. This is actually a dual artist credit here, and I imagine because the background with Mace is one artist and then this Clone Trooper is a different artist, which is pretty cool. Combo of 2 pieces of art put together. Lots of fun stuff there. Shatterpoint is a reference to one of my favorite books in Star Wars, Shatterpoint, where Mace Windu really does showcase how powerful of a Jedi he is, and then also the scenes from the Tarkovsky Clone Wars where he fights off an entire droid legion by himself. Shatterpoint's a very good card. At its base level, it's a 4 cost Vigilance that just defeats the non-leader unit with 3 or less remaining HP, but at its max, it's a vanquish 1 turn early. And there's a lot of really good work you can do with this. And because it's an uncommon, this is the thing you're going to be able to utilize in draft, because we have to have high effectiveness blue removal in every single draft set. I feel like Magic players have to deal with this a lot when they basically see all the good removal pieces in Limited, even if they're not necessarily good for Premier or good for constructed for them. They're still good in Limited and will win you events just by having the most amount of control pieces in your deck. So, and Shatterpoint fills that for us in this game. And while I love the concept of it, we do not need more blue removal pieces. We do not need more blue removal pieces. We do not need more blue removal pieces. You thought we already saw all the creatures that would work in a Kanan deck. You were wrong. In fact, we got a ton more, plus some extra cards that potentially make blue-green creatures a fairly solid strategy, depending on if you can survive to the turns to be able to get these big space whales at. We already saw the Hyperspace Wayfarer, I believe it was a 6-cost 4/10 green from me. Link in the description below to that video. And we know that Ahsoka can give these things Sentinel to be able to make them very strong. But what if you want to play Kanan? Well, Kanan still has a solid strategy into some of these, whether you want to play him as blue-green, blue-red, or even, potentially at the end of this, blue-yellow. So we're going to start off with 2 previews here by Les Cartes. Link in the description below to their YouTube channel previewing these cards. Starting off with Graceful Purrgil, 5-cost Vigilance Space Unit, another lightsaber-wielding space whale, 2 power, 7 health creature, flat Sentinel, a common number 69 giggity out of 264 in LOF. It's a high cost, big blocking creature in space, but the next card we're seeing is going to showcase why some of these are going to be very, very good if they can stick to the board and you can survive to those points, because we have Protect the Pod. This is a 4-cost command tactic event. A friendly non-vehicle unit deals damage equal to its remaining HP to an enemy unit. This is common number 128 out of 264 in LOF. So basically strike true for non-vehicles, but dealing damage based upon remaining HP rather than the damage that it does. And because our big space whales have 7 health, 10 health, and even some of our leaders, which are non-vehicles, can get up in health with 6, 7, 8 in Kanan's case, or 10 in Avar Chris's case, you have a lot of really good options to be able to use Protect the Pod to target any enemy unit. It's not in the same arena. It's not just a ground unit. It's not just a space unit. It is any enemy unit, including leaders. This is a very good card for decks that are trying to stall themselves out. So your early game is going to be things like Sentinels and Restore, your Concord Dawn Interceptors, your Village Protectors, whatever can give you Restore, Moisture Farmers if you want. And then your mid to late game is going to be these big whales plus Protect the Pod. Next, however, we have 2 cards from Unlimited MDR, link in the description below. We have here Grappling Guardian, a 7-cost Vigilance Space Unit, 3 power, 9 health. Creature trait. When played, you may defeat a space unit with 6 or less remaining HP. This is common number 71 out of 264 in LOF. This takes out basically all of the 6 cost or less units that have the vehicles or space units that have that aren't like the biggest Star Destroyers. This could even take out the red Devastator because that's got 9/6. So you have a lot of interesting options with the Grappling Guardian, and then next turn you could follow it up with the Protect the Pod to be able to deal, if it has the full 9 health, 9 damage to some enemy unit that's on the board. And then you just try to use these to slowly poke your opponent down and do some interesting stuff with that. However, what if you don't want to play green? What if you want to play yellow? Well, we have the card for you. This card is called Pounce. It is a 2-cost Cunning Trick event. Attack with a creature unit. It gets +4 for this attack. This is a common number 224 out of 264 in LOF. Beyond any other comments, this art is incredible. I love it. Fantastic. I need hyperspace versions of these. Hyperfoil versions of these, excuse me. So I love Loftcats. I love Rebels. Rebels is probably my favorite piece of current Disney Star Wars media. I don't know, man. I just got really attached to it when I was watching it. Loftcats are cute. Ezra's funny. Also dumb, but also funny. Pounce is really good because you get to attack with a creature and then it gets +4/+0. That's a massive swing on some of these things. Your Graceful Purrgil is now swinging for 6. Your Grappling Guardian is now swinging for 7. The Hyperspace Wayfarer is now swinging for 8. The next card is going to be swinging for, I think, 14. We'll talk about that in a second. The only problem so far, as of recording, there are no yellow creatures. There's red creatures, green creatures, blue creatures, and the Porgs, which are aspectless. So technically, Pounce with the Porgs could be a pretty interesting combo. If your last move of the round, you can afford to spend your resources on the Curious Flock, and then your next round, if you have the initiative, throw that Pounce on them to do a ton of damage. There are some interesting combo potentials here, and this could make something like Kanan Yellow a fairly interesting combo if you have enough good and solid blue creatures to run with. But without yellow creatures, you are dipping into yellow for this and other fantastic yellow cards, but the unit support isn't there, which is very, very unfortunate, again, so far. However, yellow-red creatures with the Tukata and the Frylock that come out at 3 and 2 respectively, being able to pounce into an 8 damage attack with those can be very quick, very tricksy, and it's something that I think everybody needs to pay attention to, because this card can absolutely decimate a strategy that is not prepared for a 8 damage swing minimum turn 2. Be prepared. Last card in this batch here, we have the Mythosaur. 9 cost, Vigilance Ground unit, Folklore Awakened, 10 power, 10 health, Mandalorian and creature traits, shielded, so it's immune to damage for 1 packet. Friendly upgraded units can't be exhausted or returned to hand by enemy card abilities, referencing the Mandalorians having their armor, which is pretty cool. Friendly leaders gain the Mandalorian trait, which is wild. This is a legendary number 73 out of 264 in LOF. The Mythosaur is a great, absolutely fantastic card on paper. Now, I know some people are able to play games with the Crate Dragon to be able to get it up to 8, to 9, or 8 using Han 2, but oftentimes games will end before this becomes a relevant resource turn. So you do have to worry about that. However, if you're playing the creature stall deck, this guy will get onto the board most of the time probably and be a pretty significant impact, because now, again, if you're playing Kanan, all of your units that have shields on them are upgraded units, which means they can't be exhausted or returned to hand. So they have to be defeated or damaged down. And in order to be damaged down, you got to clear that shield first, and then they could be bounced or whatever. But the Mythosaur helps you protect things that are upgraded and give you the opportunity to be able to move further with your strategy of just blasting your opponent with big units, protecting your other units with those big units with Sentinels, or just damaging enemies with stuff like Protect the Pod. It's a really neat card. I really hope somebody can do something cool with the strategy. My main problem is that it's such a high cost. It's a very prohibitive play in a format and kind of gameplay mindset where efficiency is key and you have to win games before 6 or 7. There are people out there winning games on 5 before their opponent can even flip their leader. 5 to 9 is a pretty big resource disparity, and unless you're running things like resupply carrier, or super laser technician, there is a high likelihood you never hit this Mythosaur, and that's pretty sad because this is a very cool card that does some very fun and neat lore stuff and should be more usable than it probably will end up being. If you're wondering where the Ahsoka coverage is, even though I already talked about where it was, I already did a recap video of that towards last week. It was on Thursday. I did a premiere for it. There was a bunch of people there. We were all hanging out talking about Ahsoka the leader and also the 2 previews that I had. Link in the description below to that video. Go check it out. You probably already know all the stuff that's associated with Ahsoka anyway. Happy she's here. There you go. But that's all we have this week. Lots of good yellow cards, because yellow needs more good cards. Lots of good blue cards, because blue needs more cards. As I review these things, I am definitely coming to a realization that there's going to be a shift in power once set 7 drops, because that's when we hit our rotation. Instead of having 1 through 7, we'll have 4 through 7. But I do think there's going to be a more extreme shift in the meta once sets 1 through 3 drop than what people are expecting. There are a lot of staple cards. There's a lot of comparisons that people are looking at and comparing with set 1 through 3 cards that players probably aren't prepared to lose just yet. And since we're not seeing aggressive reprints of base staple cards that might be necessary to get us through the 4 through 7 meta, we're going to have to deal with the things that we see here and how much power that they have behind them. So I'll talk about all of that in another video, likely after set 5 drops in its completion and after the Galactic Championship, because there's a lot of focus on what's going to be happening at the GC at the end of July. So lots of fun stuff for blue, lots of fun stuff for yellow, a little bit of green, a little bit of red, a little bit of everything this past week. 2 more leaders coming up. We'll talk about those when they come up. We have, I actually don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I know we're probably expecting a heroism only leader. We are definitely looking at missing a blue villainy leader. I believe we're missing a green villainy leader. We're missing a red heroism leader. And I believe we are missing both heroism and villainy cunning leaders. So we'll have to see exactly what gets chopped up to fit that heroism only leader, if we might receive that as the antithesis to Darth Revan. So fun stuff coming down the line. I am preparing this early, so if there were any more previews that happened after 2:30 on Friday, I missed them, didn't have time to be able to get stuff because I am actually taking a road trip down to Des Moines, Iowa to check out the Progenitor's Gambit, which is the U.S. National Championship for Alpha Clash. In fact, I'm actually reading the book, which I think the lore is pretty cool as it stands out so far. I'm like a third of the way through this book because the card art is cool, the game seems cool, the setting is cool. It reminds me of old. It actually reminds me a lot of Overpower in terms of the art design for the game. But I'll be checking that out, and I actually might end up making a video comparing my experience at the regional qualifier for Star Wars Unlimited to this U.S. National Championship for Alpha Clash. So if you're interested in that, be on the lookout for that if I choose to make that. I should at least document my feelings on both experiences. So, but that's it. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. I appreciate each and every one of you. Like this video, help with the engagement algorithms, do all the things that are necessary to push this video up, because that would be very helpful. Comment what your favorite preview you've seen so far is, what you think of our two leaders that we talked about a little bit this week in a couple of different videos. Morgan Elsbeth, Ahsoka Tano. Very heavy Ahsoka TV presence, as we said at the beginning. Very cool stuff. Shin Hati, Balin Skull, automatic 10 out of 10s for me, realistically. The Garbage Roller's got the best previews this week. So congrats, guys. Subscribe to this Star Wars Unlimited channel for all of your Star Wars Unlimited needs. I'm RybackStun. You've been my amazing audience. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next one, and I will see you in the stars.